Hey, and welcome to another Behind the Music. This time we're listening to Dealing with Demise. It's a track that I kind of wanted to show the spiccatos off more than anything. The spiccatos on this Cello Untamed library are really deep and really powerful. So this track was written specifically with those in mind. And the kind of pulsing rhythm that carries on throughout was like the foundation of it, and everything else was built on top. It was the most requested. When I kind of like put a shout out for, do you want to hear any more of these? Lots of people jumped up, put their hand up and said, yep, can we please hear this one? So there's obviously something about it that people like. So hopefully going through this, you'll kind of understand how I got the sounds, how I wrote the track, and then kind of like how it's built up. Like I say, there's a few layers in there that you might not realise. So like we did with the last one, what we'll do is we'll just play the track from start to finish. You can see the MIDI data live on screen, and then I'll go over some of the tracks, the improvisations that I used, and like kind of how the track was made up, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. So let's just play the track, and then we'll go from there. So that's the track in essence. Hopefully you saw quite a lot of what was going on there, but we're going to go through now a few of the different instruments and kind of like voicings and things to see what happened. I mean, how this track's predominantly built up, the foundation of it, what I really wanted to do was demonstrate how deep the spiccato sounds, how deep that cello gets. Polly said in her interview, if you watch it on the website, that she bought that bass because it has such a deep bassy sound, and that's what's demonstrated on the spiccato line. So it's basically just a C, but played very gently, quite ominous. And that's what I wrote first. I was just like, I want this track purely to be based on this really, really kind of like pulsing bass line. And the tempo of it was really, really difficult to decide. It started quite fast to begin with. It was more, but the more and more I wrote this piece, the more and more I just wanted to slow it down and kind of extract kind of like more and more tension out of it. The biggest question I got on Instagram was, how did I achieve such a deep spiccato sound? And it's quite deep and bassy anyway to begin with. But what I did was double up that cello line and then just pitch shifted it down a full octave. We don't have a double bass yet, so this is kind of like my workaround, because I only wanted to use our instruments in these tracks. So the best way to do this, if you've never done this before, and this works on quite a lot of string instruments, not just for our own, but like others that you might own as well. So it's worth playing around with this, and you don't. It's not something that you think is going to work, because you think, well, I'm pitch shifting this way beyond what is musical. but on some stuff you can really get away with it. On violins, well, I'll show you in a minute other kind of things that we've done. But basically within Kontakt, you can do this within a plugin. So if you just load it up like a pitch shifter plugin in Logic or Cubase or something like that, that's fine. But I think this sounds way better and much more accurate, is just to take the tuning all the way down. So this is what it sounds like normally. And then you just take it down a full octave there. So that's kind of how I did it, and then it's just doubled up. I think you can get away with it on its own, but then when it's doubled up with the normal, the regular kind of pitch, it then sounds like two players as well. But I think that sounds perfect. It's so deep and bassy. It's great. So that's just it. It's the whole, all the way through. Those notes are locked on the grid as well. They are super quantized. I'm not normally a fan of quantizing. I normally play without a click and just play stuff in and let it, feel the way it's going to go. But on these, it was just like, no, let's just make it almost like robotic and quite mechanical. So those are on the grid. So onto the piano piece next, and this is like kind of, it's neither, it's neither complicated nor sophisticated, but that's kind of like, that's my style really. Don't use many notes, but make those notes like, really count and do a lot of damage in a good way to the piece. It's using our upright felt piano, which is available to download for free on the website. Just put your email address in to subscribe to our email list and you'll get a link to it immediately. If you want to unsubscribe immediately, feel free to do so. Keep the piano, use it forever. It's absolutely fine. So it's really, really simple. It's just a C minor to begin with, then to an A flat. And the A flat's neither major nor minor, but I think because you've just played a minor chord behind it, your ear's still got that memory of what that minor chord feels like and carries it over to that chord, even though you're only playing two notes of it. Then down to E flat major, then up to F major, and then one of my golden notes again. Which in the previous behind the music, I think like, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments there. I think that's a sus2 chord. Logic thinks it's an add 9 chord because it's the 9th chord. Eight notes in a scale. The 9th note is that, but surely that's the 2nd. So like, I'm not really, down with music theory too much. So like, if you think that's another chord, go for it. But either way, it's, it's kind of like the F major, and then it's kind of like the G and just hanging there, which is like a really nice, it's almost like a note that just hangs there and lingers there in the air and then pulls you back to the chord progression again. So I like that. It's just kind of like, it's almost like a signaling bell that's kind of like, telling you something's about to happen, but then it pulls you back down to it. So that kind of chord progression, there's some subtle changes in there throughout the piece, but that's pretty much the essence of it. Then we use these violin improvisations, which is Violin Untamed. And this again, this is really simple. There's not a lot to happen with this. I'll just solo it so you can hear some of it on its own. And I think this is what these libraries really excel at, is when you just want to play something really, really simple, but you need it to just constantly be interesting. So that's those ones. The same trick I've used as with the spiccato, where we've doubled that up on the cello. I've used these flatando lines. but then doubled them up and taken them down an octave in exactly the same way we did the cello. So just in contact, you take it down by -12, and that brings you down a full octave. So yeah, a cello shouldn't go that low, but by doing that, you kind of like, it adds quite a lot of texture to it. And when you've got it, it's not quite at the same sort of volume level as the normal flatando line. But I think it just adds a bit more texture and a bit more character to the sound. It's kind of like, you know, if you wanted to translate this to a live session again, to re-record it, this wouldn't work, but this is what you can do with sampling. This is what you can do with sampled instruments. So the two of them together, and they're playing exactly the same line, so they're not doing anything. I literally played one line and then doubled it up. So that's those, that's really nice. At the end, it kind of just tails off all the way down to the end. As you can hear, that cello sounds so rich and deep, it's really cool. And the same with the improvised cello line at the end. Here, again, I think I mentioned in the last video that, you know, there is some notes that you can just play for a really long time. And let me just solo that one so you can hear it. That's great, just to carry like a single note like that for so long and still sound interesting, to me is like, you know, that's exactly what I've been after for a long time. The last kind of trick I used, I don't think this is anything original, you might have heard it before, is just to use a sine wave to just thicken up. It's almost like kind of like it's a bit like reverb in the way that if you add reverb to tracks, it kind of like cements and glues them together, and I think a sine wave does this as well, especially with virtual instruments like this, where they are a bit more broken up and they're not quite as fluid as, like, you know, maybe 16 violins at once. Is that a sine wave does quite a good job of just adding that undercurrent. I don't think it's something that you should hear in the track, so it is always quite low. But, you know, sometimes it's just worth adding there if you just want to sort of like glue the whole bottom end of the track together. You should use these notes quite low. These were programmed in specifically. There was no doubling up here. Make sure you've got some speakers for this, not headphones, because I don't think it will come through like over earbuds or like, you know, an iPhone or something. And it is just like the EXS24 in Logic. Logic Note users will know this really well. EXS24 is kind of like, you know, it's one of those classic plugins. But yeah, the default, if you don't load up anything, you just get this sine wave. Hang on, let's just play it. And I've got some fairly, you know, decent monitors in this room. Fairly, you know, they're quite good at bass, and I can just about get it. Like I say, when I think you play all of the tracks together, I don't think the sine wave is something you should like be able to pick out. I think it's just something that you should almost like more, you should feel it. Same as reverb, really. So you've probably heard about that trick before, but if you haven't, it's one of those really useful things to just, if the bottom end of the track just needs a bit more like weight and a bit more guts and a gluing together, just really simple sine wave. Doesn't matter where you get it from. EXS24 is the quickest one to hand in Logic, and you can use that to your advantage. In terms of processing, have I missed anything out? I don't think I've missed anything out so far, but basically in terms of processing, they've all been, let's bring up the mixer, they've all been added to a bus which has just got Concert Hall Vienna, as always, like, you know, classic reverb that I talked about on the last tutorial quite in depth. So they've all just been bussed. Quite a lot of reverb on a lot of these. I wanted it to the spiccatos I wanted to feel quite in your face, so they've not got an awful amount, so they feel quite present and close, whereas everything else feels a bit more distant and a bit more, you know, a lot more reverby, just to give that, you know, different sense of perspective. On the master bus, I've done similar kind of thing to what I did last time, so it's just kind of like a low pass filter, a low cut filter I should say, a high pass filter, and then just taken a little bit out of the bottom end and then just ever so slightly pushed up the whole top end. There is an overall compressor on this one, like not hardly doing anything, so I've used it at like 1.5 to 1, so it's just like, it's just a little bit really, you know, just doing. I find this Platinum digital compressor that's built into Logic really transparent. It's one of those compressors that if you don't want to like hear the compressor, so to speak, or like you don't need the compressor to color the track in any way, then this is a good one just to sort of like, you know, bring everything together, because this track does get quite loud at points. So this was just to do the first stage of you know, kind of limiting, and then there is an overall limiter at the end there, just to bring it into some sort of shape. So that's everything, I think. Oh, there's a couple of compressors on the spiccatos as well, probably a bit heavier. Yeah, these are around 2 to 1. I think I just wanted to make them even more sort of like crisper and like, you know, push as much of the tail end of the spiccato into the mix as possible. So let's just solo these so you can hear them. Fairly fast attack, so it's catching the front end but not letting too much of it through. Yeah, it's doing a little bit. Just making it a little bit more gritty, I think. And I don't think there's anything else on any of the others. No, they're all just as they were out the box. Let's just check some of the microphone positions on these. I think they're probably just default. I think, like I said on the last one, a lot of these demo tracks I kind of just wanted to show what the instruments would do out the box and not have to do loads and loads of crazy things, you know, to pull them into any kind of shape. So yeah, exactly as they are out the box. There's nothing crazy on there. So I hopefully that's like, you know, dispelled a few myths about this track, because there were a few questions on like Instagram, like how did you do that, where did you get a double bass from, where do you know, you haven't got one yet, like, you know, those kind of things. So hopefully there's a few things in there, a few little tricks that you'll see that, you know, can bring instruments, you know, into somewhere else and like make them just a little bit more different than you're used to hearing. So like, if there's anything I've missed, leave a comment in the, you know, in the comment section below on YouTube. I'd love to hear, you know, what you think about it. Again, like, you know, with the last track, if there's things that you think, you know, why didn't you do that, or like, you know, it would have been great if you could have just demonstrated that, or like, you know, I wanted to hear what that was doing, or let me know and I'll respond to it in the comments. I'm happy to show you anything with these. So hopefully you've learned something there. I always learn something by watching other composers, no matter how kind of like, you know, what level they're on. You know, we're all learning together. Doesn't matter how far along your career you are, you're always learning new tricks and new stuff, and hopefully there's a couple in there for you. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.